Welcome back, Bantwana Benkosi. This is Power Talk indeed, and what's going on with the sound, man? Huh? No, siyabonga. 0861987000. We've got with us, as I indicated here in studio, Bulelwa Makeke, Acting Deputy Director General, Corporate Services at the National Prosecuting Authority, otherwise called the NPA. Welcome, Mama.
Thank you.
And thanks indeed for coming through.
Yeah, thanks for
we've been looking for the National Prosecuting Authority leader, Mebatoi. She has never been to power. You know, we've been looking for her for a very long time.
Is it?
Yeah.
Have you invited her?
Of course.
I'm not aware of
Instead,
it.
we get you, and you are acting.
No, I'm coming from my own. I mean, I'm not aware of her being asked and not coming, but I'll just check with her spokesperson.
It is a thing that the advocate Batoi doesn't do a lot of one-on-one interviews. At least we can agree on that.
She doesn't. The organization is a big organization that has a lot of
But you have to
leaders.
be held accountable. You are here.
Yeah,
You are here. There has to be a public interrogation of her performance outside of Parliament. And that's the importance of the media, which as an institution, I think you would agree it's important.
Totally.
Okay.
So maybe she doesn't do as much as you would like her to do. I will give her that message.
Please give her that.
Certainly does.
But people would like her here. I mean, she's the head of the NPA, and there's very little interaction from her part, in my estimation, with the media. And there is huge public concerns and decreasing levels of confidence in the institution. And I think you go through your reports, you go through the things that you guys are doing. You got to be out there talking about them, in my view. And it doesn't help that she has never been to power. Where
do you get that? She's never been to power since you've been here, you mean?
No, in general. I'd
have to check.
Leave me.
Leave
me. Okay. I want to start out with a simple a numbers question. And I was picking the 2022-2023 report, but I see in front of you you've got the 23-24 report. We'll go through it. But in general, you've got this humongous number of over 300,000 reported crimes that get reported with the South African Police Services. And the NPA, through some process which you will possibly explain for the rest of us, takes only the cases that they think have a prospect of success, then prosecutes those cases, which are often incredibly lower than the reported crimes. And then gives itself a rating of 96% or 80%, often above 80% conviction rate. When you check those numbers, it's like a dramatically huge discrepancy. And I think the confidence on the capacity for combating crime, but also for taking people who are, it has to sort of come closer to the 300,000 something cases that get reported. Majority of which will be murder, what the police often call those robbery, murder, as well as that thing of grievous bodily harm. So tell us about that. Why this self-rating, which you don't rate yourself on the basis of the broader cases that get opened?
Yes, no, because that's just how it works. You know, the prosecuting authority or the prosecutors will rate themselves in terms of what they do with what they have. Do you get it? So in the broader picture of the country, crime is at the level that it's really out of this world. I mean, the numbers are huge. But what happens is now the police are front-facing and they will deal with the hundreds and thousands that you're mentioning. But then that is all a process of getting the crime in. People report crimes. In the process, the investigation happens and all of that. But at a point that a docket gets sent to the NPA to consider prosecution, it has filtered down a lot because for various reasons, and the police will be able to explain this to you better. There'll be cases that go undetected. All kinds of different things that will happen with some of the cases that will not even make it to the system.
Yeah.
But those that do make it to the system, and then a docket is taken to the NPA for consideration for prosecution. The point of that is exactly that you actually need to consider whether there's a case to start with. If there's evidence that will actually take the case forward. So there's a process there where have controls.
Where do we get the report of, so we are able to zoom into whether the fault is the capacity of the NPA or the capacity of the SAPS?
We're not even at a capacity issue at this point yet. I'm just explaining the process. So the process is now, filtering from the big number that you're getting from the police. In fact, even with the police, there will be crimes that they don't even get to detect. And there will crimes that when you go to report, they will not be taken in. But I'm not wanting to deal with that part of things, the police. So when it gets to the police will arrest or maybe investigate and decide, okay, well, we've got enough. We think the NPA needs to look at it to take it to court. But then the prosecutors will look now at, because remember, as a prosecuting authority, we have a heavy burden of proving a crime, beyond reasonable doubt. That's the onus there is really deep, and I think somebody at some point needs to really get drill down to what that means exactly. So sometimes you find that people say, but it's so clear. I mean, we saw that person shooting that person, those things. But when you actually have to get to court in the elements of proving a case, I just really different. But then before you stop me, let me just finish this thought. So at the point where it gets to a prosecuting authority to decide whether or not there's a case to be taken forward for prosecution, it's there that they actually determine exactly this that I'm saying, that is there a case, are we going to be able to argue this case in terms of what a criminal burden is.
No, that's simple actually. It's not complicated for many of us. Somebody does a crime, I report it, the NPA gets a docket, decides whether this has a prospectus. I'm saying that we can all agree there's high levels of crime in this country. And if we factor your self-congratulatory 90% conviction rate, it doesn't quite account for the fact that you are speaking. I'll take you to page 69 of your report. Yeah. For an example, you've got there matters reported at the sites. TCC would be your Tutuzela care centers. So you've got these cases. Of these reported matters, 33,000 related to sexual offenses, 5.6 to domestic violence. 1,400 of 33,000 or combined finalized cases with 1,142 convictions. Look at the differences from 30,000, almost 40,000 to just 1,500. But you are going to say we have 77% conviction rate. It's too wide. I'm saying as society, if we are judging ourselves as to whether we are combating crime or not, isn't it misleading to congratulate yourself of 79% of 1,400 when you had 40,000 cases
reported at the TCC? Yeah. So when they are reported, it's like you're reporting at a police station in a sense. It's a raw case that needs to be investigated. So there's a whole process of investigating a case first. That takes time, you would know. I mean, you're not going to have a case reported now and tomorrow it goes to court.
No, we agree with that.
So the reporting takes into account all the cases that come into the TCC. the whole process, of investigating up to a point where you actually have cases that you take to court is a long process.
Let me understand what you're saying. So you've got about 40,000, let's say 38,000 cases that get reported. Only 1,400 are fit to be taken to a court. Is that a normal society?
So this is a report for this financial year. So we keep ourselves to statistics that relate to this financial year.
Okay.
So you will find that there are cases that have been reported. Well, yeah, still within the same. But as I say, as you would also know, investigation of cases takes time. But of those that were investigated up to a point where they were ready to be taken to court and the process of court happened, this is the number that we actually ended up with. That and therefore the conviction rate doesn't talk to the overall crime in the country. It doesn't talk to the overall crime that's reported to the police. It talks to it's a percentage of what the prosecution takes to court. And therefore, out of those numbers that were taken to court...
What should we make of this low number of cases that get taken to court? It is too big. It's about less than 5% of the 38,000
what
cases.
Should you make of it is a good question. What you should make of it is that, first of all, the first thing I explained is that not all the cases that are reported will end up in court for various reasons. Undetected cases... even in your investigation, you find that there isn't enough to take a matter to court. Sometimes you have witnesses that are not willing to come. There are various elements that actually impact on whether or not you have a case that you can confidently take forward to a criminal court to be sure that you'll get. You even then when you can't be sure, but I mean, once you decide to take a matter to court, you're satisfied that all the elements are there. Then it just needs you to argue the matter in court. That's what. So if you're looking at the stats as a reflection of what's happening in the country overall, you're gonna get this gap, because when we're reporting our conviction rates, we're not reporting what happened out there. We're not reporting against what was reported to the police.
Is the NPA willing to accept that?
We are reporting what has been taken. No, but I mean, I'm explaining that it can be misleading. The cases that you take to court, that's where you're going to get a conviction. You're not going to get
Why are the cases so low taken to court?
Because, I mean, I've just explained. The burden of proving a criminal case in court is huge. So you have to make sure that you have evidence that is not false.
Let me ask it differently. How do we improve that situation? I mean, you and I, for the benefit of society, I think we can agree, 40,000 people report crimes, only 1,300 convictions out of those reports. That's not normal. What do we do to improve that? Is what happens? Do I go to the police for their detective capability so that they bring much more convincing cases to you, or there's a problem with the nitpicking on the part? I'll give you an example. Leave the GBV. I was going to GBV because it's a contentious issue. The same issue arises with SIU. SIU, in its report, it's not here. But they would have referred in the 2022-2023 financial year 680 referrals to the NPA. The conviction rate that the NPA takes is less than 100. And these people attain court orders to go and recover money, recover assets. All these 680 something cases would have had those court orders. They give you evidence, and the conviction rate vis-a-vis the cases that they refer to you still low. Help us make sense of that.
Yeah, you will not make sense of it if you insist on making it a linear process, like it starts here and it gets here, like it's a straight line, because it isn't. And I've indicated to you what all the elements in between are. So first of all, a case, whether or not it gets even to the prosecuting authority to consider prosecution is a whole thing, because that's where the police are dealing with the investigation to the extent that they actually investigate thoroughly and have a very good docket that they bring to us, that goes.
So we are blaming the police?
No, we're not blaming the police. I'm explaining the process system, because unfortunately it's a systemic thing. One depends on the other. It's an interdependent process. You cannot isolate one thing out of another one. It's all related. So if you don't have cases that are properly investigated, that fall short of the the standard that you need to take a matter to a criminal court, you're not going to take it.
So properly investigated, who is that? Is it both institutions?
No, the police investigate.
Let me put it this way. I'm just trying to say, if we were to improve this situation where you have 40,000 cases reported and at least out of 40,000 you just get 10,000 convictions, builds confidence, criminals get scared, and so on and so forth. What needs to be done for that to occur?
So, Mbuyiseni, what happens is cases get reported to the police.
Mm-hmm.
We get the stats every year, the crime stats, and they give these big numbers.
Yes.
But take into account that those cases take their time for investigation and everything that happens in between. So you might find the cases that we're reporting on here are cases that came into the system 3 years ago.
Wait,
2 years ago.
So this number is not the number that was reported in the Tutukela centers this financial year?
Yes. So the point is...
Are you sure about that?
This is the difficulty. No. I'm explaining the process of that. You're thinking like, okay, you have 3,000 cases reported now. Okay, but then by the end of the year, you need to report against those cases. Investigations differ. The length of time it takes to
But the reported
invest.
cases are of this year?
Yes.
Okay, they don't come from a different year?
Yes.
All
so
right.
I was making 2 points in one. So the first point is that specifically with the Tutuzelas, because it's confined there. So these are the cases that were reported in this, and of those, this is how many we took to court, and of those, this is how much we got convictions on. This is how much. Yes. But in the bigger scheme of things, when you have a reported case at the police station, there's a long process of investigating back and forth. Sometimes they bring it to the prosecution to consider. Prosecution says, no, it's still not enough. Go back, close this gap, look at this and all of that. That takes, and this is what we report on all the time, even when we're having these interviews after cases. Cases take, it's hardly a case that you'll find a case reported this year and the whole process gets finalized within this year. Okay. Let's agree on that first. So when we're reporting our stats here, we're not reporting on cases that happened this year. Yeah. We're reporting on. So if you're going to look at it linearly, like you wanting to do, because that's where you're saying there are gaps, is that you're saying, well, this was what came in, and now this is what came out. It's a zigzaggy kind of process, and the years overlap. We will not report on cases that we haven't been dealing with in this financial year, in this annual report. And so it goes. Every annual, then we will catch up on you to see in the previous year, this is how much we had, this is how much. So this gives just the context in terms of how much came in, so that you have a sense, which is a thing, you will like it, you don't like it, because still it shows you that out of the 33,000 that were reported in ATCC, only 5. In fact, this is just relating to domestic violence cases. These stats that we're looking at now is telling a different story. It's better if we're actually looking at a simple case where we actually will tell you in a district court, this is how much we took to court, and this is how much the conviction, how many cases we got convictions on. This is the conviction rate.
Okay. If you've just joined us, this is Power Talk with me, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. We are with the Acting Deputy Director General, Corporate Services at the National Prosecuting Authority, 0861987000. If you'd like to interact with her, please do come in. We're going to take your calls because it's 10:30 and it's time for the headlines.
Stay informed. Power Talk with Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, 9 a.m. to midday on Power 98.7.
Power Talk with me, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. If you just joined us, that was a live crossing to the Discovery Conference discussing the future of clean energy. We are here in the studio and we're going to continue our conversation with the Deputy Director General Corporate Services at the NPA, Mama Bulelwa Makeke. Mama, you wanted to say something about the SIU in relation to your conviction rate.
Yes. So the SIU, in terms of their act, and I think this is a legislative issue that needs to be fixed, and I think it's got the attention of the legislators. In terms of the SIU Act, it says then where they find instances of corruption, they must refer this to the NPA, which they do. But remember, the NPA doesn't investigate. So what happened, in fact, it's been fixed now slowly, but previously what they will actually do the referral to the NPA, as they should, as the legislation says. But then the NPA would then refer it to the Hawks for criminal investigations, because remember, the SIU conducts civil, their burden of proof is
lower. Yeah.
Yes. So that is why they have to refer it for criminal process. Then the NPA doesn't actually investigate, it refers it to the Hawks to investigate. Then that takes its process. The investigation takes its process. So that's an issue on the SIU vis-a-vis NPA thing. So you cannot make that direct comparison again. But I was saying it's actually even longer, because then they'll refer to the NPA. NPA will send it to the Hawks. Then the Hawks investigate, and then they send it back to the NPA to decide on, But I wanted to say that with time, that has been sort of fixed a bit, because there's a memorandum of understanding now between, tripartite understanding, let's put it that way, that as they actually refer the matter, as they should in terms of the legislation, to the NPA, at the same time, they send it to the Hawks as well. So then that also covers the time lag in between, and it happens that way.
On page 49, in 2019, 2020, 184 people were convicted of corruption, 86 in 2020, 21, 2022, 23, 130, 22, 23, 125, and in this financial year, 135.
Yeah.
Can you address us about this financial year? It's 135 of what?
Of government officials that were...
Yeah, this is the ones that were convicted. So remember, it's the cases that went to court. Of those that went to court, 135 got convictions.
Yeah.
So what was the total?
So you see, that is the issue then with how because now we follow the indicators, how we put the indicators here. So we're here not reporting on conviction rates, we're reporting on the actual numbers. So
numbers of what? Not of conviction rates.
Of government officials that have been convicted for offences.
I'm not following. Number of government officials convicted for offences related to corruption. 135.
Yeah.
It's
I get your question.
135
Out of
how
what
many?
is
Yes,
what you're asking.
yes.
And that is what we didn't put in here, because when we're reporting here, we're reporting according to how the indicator is put in the annual report. And these are things that as we go on with our reporting, we actually getting to improve how we're reporting, because then remember, this is a document that talks to what are
so this indicator is determined by who?
It's determined by us, by the
So
NPA.
You don't know how many cases you took of corruption related to government officials to court?
Well, the prosecutors know. It's just not reported here, and I don't have it. So I'm saying...
you don't have it. All right.
Yeah, no, not that it isn't there.
Let me take callers. I do have, as I indicated, 2 additional matters I wanted to converse. One relates to TRC cases, and then the other relates to the questions around Pala. But I'm going to take callers. Lebohang Ramafuku. Are you the real executive director at Oxfam?
I used to be.
Oh, so that they still record you as that here. Okay, shoot your question, Mama.
It's really not a question, but maybe there's a question in it. You know, as I listen to your conversation in Mbuyiseni, there is a corporate answer that comes across, which is this is how the process works, it's not linear. But I have worked for 32 years on GBV. I was involved in the creation of the National Strategic Plan on GBV. Women have been speaking about how the criminal justice system fails them. The answer is inadequate if it only rests on a corporate answer. This is how the system works. I'm listening to you as I'm driving and I'm thinking to myself, geez, what does this mean for a woman who goes and the only recourse they have is to run to a Tutuzela Care Center, is to, relive their trauma with the case, the investigation or the evidence. If they had been raped, a child, a parent who takes a child. And in fact, we don't even have a South African solidarity answer with, that explains why only 5% cases are convicted. We are not sitting here and referring to the NSP that tells us that, we failed women and that GBV is a crisis in this country and that this is a multi-sectoral response. So it must worry the NPA if investigation is poor. And therefore, there must be an intersectoral approach on saying, how do we beef up our investigation? So while I appreciate that you are getting answers that explain to you how we got there, I'm not getting answers that almost, even pays homage to just how deeply troubling this issue is. Whenever I am in my house, outside my house, in the workplace, at recreation, doing shopping, I am hyper vigilant for the fact that I could be a victim of any form of violence. And I'm sorry, but with the crisis that we have, the answers that we are having, while they are factually correct and they probably answer what actually happened, they are worrying. I'm more scared than I was before the answers. Because I sit here and I say, hang on, women performed their victimhood and their trauma, showing their scars to the president when the 24 demands after the total shutdown was presented to the president. And 2, 3, 4 years after that, this is what we've got. I don't know what kind of a country I live in. Okay. And I wish that when we come into this interaction, we understand what this means. Okay. 95% of cases that don't get convicted, they are children and women. They've got lives. And violence against women, rape, femicide, shapes the lives of women. And for those that have lost their lives, it shapes the lives of their families for good. We are living in trauma as women. Can that be acknowledged at least while we understand how the process works?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mam Lebo there, former executive at Oxfam. Stembiso, 1 minute, please. Shoot.
1 minute. Okay. Sure. So the question is, the numbers. I want to know to what extent has, this project of, what do they call, mediation has contributed to the reduction of numbers. Because I know of a program that is pushed by a private company, of course, which basically work with magistrates, the NPA and others, to mediate violence against women cases. So you've taken him to the police station and all of that, then you mediate because you want to push back the backlog. So to what extent has these numbers contributed to that? And also I heard the president of the High Court in Pretoria in media talking about the fact that Gauteng is now going to be mediating some criminal cases rather than putting them through the justice system. And I was horrified.
Yeah.
To say a judge on media speaking on policy issues, is this not what the parliament should be doing? Is this not what the Chief Justice should be doing? And he goes away with it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Stembiso there in Durban. Tsepo Pitori, 1 minute, one ish.
Here's the thing, my brother. The NPA generally is hopeless, but I don't want to focus much energy on these people. Incredibly hopeless in this country. There's a reason why this country is a mess. But here's the problem, and I want to talk about the defect in the system, the whole justice system, the defect. It is lying at the police. So we've got two police in this country. We've got SAPS, and then we've got SIU. SIU is obviously for special cases, but the other guys are general cases. When you look at the requirements to appoint an investigator, who really must be the genius within all of these people in the fraternity? I mean, we look at judges, lawyers, magistrates, NPA, all of them are highly educated. The primary requirement for them to join is at least first degree at the university. But then the police, which is the people who are supposed to uncover the truth, where somebody is lying, they need to detect this, to prepare a case, hand it over to NPA for presentation. These are the people who are least qualified. The requirement is matric. Now, there's the problem. Your problem lies there.
Okay.
You have a problem where the state do not want to put money into the system because these people there's a lot of them. So they're saying for us to hire more, we must demand less so we can pay less. And as a result is high crime, less cases going to court. Because the state saying, well, let's hire more, but we must pay less. That's why they reduce even the access criteria.
Thank you, Tsepo. That's Tsepo in Pretoria. If you've just joined us, this is Power Talk with me, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi. We're with Mama Bulelwa Makeke, the acting Deputy Director General Corporate Services at the NPA. Your reaction to the callers, and just to indicate, we will have her at least for another 10 minutes after the news, so that she has the necessary time to clarify all these questions. Over to you, ma'am.
Yes, no, thank you. With Ma Ramafoko's comments, I mean, there's no arguing against it. The scourge of GBV and sexual offenses in the country is huge, is significant. And of course, it is a multi-sectoral problem, as she says. So on the one hand, my conversation with you now was just really talking to how we're reporting the conviction rates and what we're doing. But there's a bigger problem that all of us, and it's not even just the criminal justice system that actually needs to come to the party here. We have, I know at some point the president had even declared it as a national problem. It is a big problem. It needs all kinds of people to get to it. I, as a woman, have the same fears that she's talking about. And, you know, I have children who are girls, and just generally, it's a scary thing for somebody who is a woman, but just generally for everybody. So I will not even make small of what Mara Mofoko is saying, because it is a problem, but it's something that needs to be dealt with at a multi-sectoral level. And the system is not perfect. I must also admit that it fails women, particularly, and children most of the time. But there are efforts and joint efforts, and I think Minister did indicate this, because there's a cluster approach to it as well in terms of dealing specifically. It's one of the highest priorities for the cluster, the justice cluster, to make sure that we become even more victim centered in our approach. As for the NPA, for instance, the Tutuzela Care Centers is exactly a response to that, to trying to be more victim centric in how we're dealing with gender based violence and sexual offenses mainly.
But Mama argues that the people that go there and the cases that end up in the courts, that disparity for her is discouraging, meaning it's like when people are looking at the Omototo case, they're like, I can't go through that, only at the end for my case, one, not to end up in court. I'm already this rape sort of victim in the public. And the idea is to try and say, if I go to Tutuzela, at least to increase exponentially the numbers of cases that actually make it to the court that come from Tutuzela. If that's her cry, is that the numbers are not tallying, and that means it's as useless as you had a police station. That prioritization didn't work.
Yeah. It's important in terms of how we're saying we're victim-centric, and the Thuthuzela care centers are one such intervention, is that but you don't get a lot of cases that get reported there because the bulk of the cases get reported to police stations. But let's focus on the Thuthuzela in terms of how it offers victim-centric approaches. Is that, first of all, it deals with the, secondary victimization that would generally happen in other places. Here, it's more, you're protected as a victim if you go to the Thuthuzela care center because everything happens in this one site from reporting throughout. And the other care that you will get outside of actually getting a justice in the normal criminal justice system, and the support that you get as a victim there. But in fact, if you compare the conviction rates from the Thuthuzela cases that are reported there versus the general ones, you do find that there's a higher conviction rate in cases that are reported in Thuthuzela care centers. We're about 78% at the moment in terms of
reported Thuthuzela cases.
But now remember, there's 66 Thuthuzela care centers nationally at the moment. So there's a small number that actually goes
I want
there.
to give you a chance to look at your report around. You've got a page there on TCC cases that are reported, and it's the one we were conversing earlier, where 58,000, but the convictions of court are 1,300. You look at it. I'm going to go to the news with Nyaka Lotefu, and we'll continue the conversation thereafter. Stay tuned. Welcome back. We're going to conclude that conversation with the NPA, Mama Bulelwa Makeke. I just wanted to pose the last two questions related to specialized crimes. There's a big problem of illicit financial flows, tax base erosion on the one hand, and the questions of cyber crimes, conviction rates. One of the claims the minister made when she was here was the NPA's general lack of capability. What is the plan in relation to changing that reality?
Yeah. It is a fact that there's limited capacity and capability in terms of specializations. And in fact, one of the interventions that we put in place is there's a whole exercise that was conducted, an audit across the entire NPA to assess exactly, what levels of skills and, experience, capability to deal with specialized cases. So the results of that exercise were that generally the prosecutors are very good at prosecuting general cases, but when it comes to specializations, that's where the limitations are. And in fact, in the past years, unfortunately, we have actually lost a lot of the capability in the NPA in those areas. People left. They're now with the private sector, but there's a lot of
what
outflow.
Accounts for their departure? Is it money?
A number of things, but remember at some point there was this general malaise in the NPA in terms of what was happening with, I bring in the issue around the state capture and the allegations that the NPA itself as an institution, was captured. That's the allegation. But we can say for a fact that a lot of people with those specializations that we needed left around that time. It's a fact. So this is now trying to rebuild all of that, and there are many interventions, especially focusing on corruption and organized crime, because now that's a new, well, it's not new, but I mean the numbers are really rising in terms of how organized crime is taking over the country. So there's a project that we're actually engaging in now that focuses specifically on building capacity and
is this a training program, or
part of it is training, but yes, also exposure to other jurisdictions. We're actually getting to learn how they do things differently, but also adding more people into the system that can help, with those skills. So it's multi-pronged, and I think with time we're actually going to start reporting as the intervention starts to put in the results. We will actually have that conversation again. We will have, in fact, a podcast that we focus specifically on that project. So we'll keep you. But I mean, we're not running away from the fact that we did suffer a lot in terms of a loss of the capability that was necessary for the specialized. They still are in the organization, but overall we suffer in that area, and that we're trying to rebuild.
2 final questions. One, the Phala matter. When are we getting to the finalization of a decision, whether you are prosecuting or whether you are not?
You might have missed this,
Okay.
Dr. Ndlozi. The DPP in Limpopo made the decision, if it's not early this year, then last year, to decline to prosecute.
So there's no prosecution.
Yeah.
And why?
There's
no prospect of success. Okay. My final one is the question of Omotoso. How do you rate the performance of the NPA at the Omotoso case? On a scale of 1 to 10, and why?
The Omotoso matter is huge. It was a high-profile case. So if we're actually going to be rating ourselves purely on that case, it will make it look like there's no capacity to deal with sexual offenses and all those things that were there. And we will not blame people who actually think that way, because this was in our view for the past 8 years. And it failed. It was dismal. Look, there's no running around. It was a dismal failure. In terms, especially if you look at what the judge said in her judgment, focusing on the conduct of the prosecutors, which is something that we're actually looking into now. That
will there be any action on those prosecutors?
Totally. So
what is likely to happen?
Well, if you take action against somebody for misconduct or whatever else, it actually has to be based on an investigation, which is what is currently happening at the moment.
So there is an investigation.
There is, and in fact, after the judgment, because the investigation had started already previously, because remember there was a previous
retrial, yeah.
Yes. And then the judgment now threw more things at us in terms of some of the possible misconduct of the entire prosecution team and the one that took over. So now that has been broadened to make sure that is also looked at. But trust me, if there's by mid-June we will have the report on at least the misconduct part of it, or alleged. And if that happens, there will be serious action that's taken, because I mean, especially for a key case like this on GBV, sexual offenses, it's a major setback for the organization. But it mustn't be looked at as that's how the NPA deals. In fact, the entire system, that's not how they actually deal with sexual offenses matters. It was really unfortunate how this one turned out. And, well, at least we're trying to recover a bit of the lost ground there, because now you would be aware that a decision was made to appeal the matter on a limited, because the state cannot go and appeal like a normal accused. That would be, but there's questions of law that are being reserved that need to be looked at in terms of how overall, just whether justice was served or not by just looking at the conduct of the prosecutors and not looking at the overall, the evidence that was led throughout the process. Because part of what the judge says is that she does not believe what the witnesses were, the victims were reporting there, but the focus was mainly on the conduct of the prosecutor. So whether or not that is, in terms of the law and serving justice in our country, is appropriate, that is something now that will be the subject of this appeal that the state is putting up. So that's one we'll wait to see how it goes. But I emphasize it was a huge embarrassment for the NPA. It shouldn't have happened. But there are measures in place to make sure it never happens again.
Thank you.
It must never happen again.
Acting Deputy Director in the NPA. Thanks so much for coming through, and thanks for creating time. I hope
There's
we
never
meet
enough
again
time.
before the end of the year. Please do take our message to Miss Batoyi that we would really like to have her in studio.
I will certainly do that.
Okay. If you've just joined us, this is Power Talk with me, Mbuyiseni Ndlozi, and we're going to now move to the former Ambassador Welile Nhlapo. Stay tuned.